Before we begin this incredible video, I would like to briefly review two major parts of the channel. The first is the coffee shop members. These are fellow content creators that have joined forces with me to create amazing content. Please check them out and support. Collabs will be happening on their channels and mine throughout the next few weeks, and will likely remain that way for the near future. The second part is my membership deals. For my servers, talking to me, other members, versus battles, games, prizes, and more, you can join now for only $5 a month via Cash App. Simply comment down below if you want the Cash App discount membership. Thank you all, and without further ado, let's get back to the video. Now, this mostly sprouts from one of my most popular early experiences with a versus battle being Darkseid and Thanos, and it did extremely well when I was a really small channel. And it's one of the most popular battles in the community. And over time, the more I've researched, the more I've seen things, I realize it's a stupid battle. I don't like it for a multitude of reasons. And so, power scaling aside, all that, I'm going to talk about several reasons why I feel like this battle isn't that good to begin with, and why it's not that great of a matchup. I'll of course go over what I believe is the biggest attraction, but after that, I'm going to give them multiple reasons, so hear me out on this one on why Darkseid vs. Thanos, truthfully, is a stupid matchup. First up, the appeal. What is the appeal of this matchup? Honestly, there's only one connection I feel like draws the attention, and that is the whole beefing with main teams from each verse. Of course, Avengers for Thanos, Justice League versus Darkseid. But I mean, if like beefing with main teams with the criteria, Starro versus Thanos would supposedly be a banger matchup everyone wants to see. It's just not true. And they beef with the major teams because they do stuff that impacts the verse most of the time, so it's not even necessarily like the villain's just out to take out those specific teams. Usually they're just roadblocks in the way of their plans. So I don't even think that's like a huge selling point on the matchup. Of course, this was the one that mostly sold me when, back in the day. This is why I thought that matchup was great. But looking back at it, that's really all there is, and even then, it's not that great of a point to me. So, with that out the way, let's move on to the several reasons in the step-by-step breakdown of why I don't think it's a great matchup. First up, Darkseid is versus Thanos wants to be. So, this is more so just like a difference in status of who they are. They're completely different. One is made to literally dominate, doesn't have any other purpose. That's his function, is to dominate. Sort of like how Galactus' function in Marvel is to feed. At that point, we see that this Darkseid simply is. He wants to dominate. He has no choice. That's just his like archetypal function in reality. On the other hand, Thanos is more so serving another source, which is death. He's trying to appease death. He's trying to bring about nothingness. He's a nihilist, and he wants nothing more to be in the loving embrace of Mistress Death and to please her as a concept by imposing what he believes to be her wrath and will upon the verse. So they're completely different off the bat with kind of how they function in the verse. Next up, one is a god, where the other one comes across as someone like on the verge of godliness and seeking it. So Darkseid always has been a god. He's a new god, right? The thing is, he's trying to progress and become the only god that matters. He's trying to dominate, trying to be the Michael Jordan of gods. Whereas Thanos is a deviant, chasing the embrace of a cosmic being, a god itself, which is death. So, to me, that's completely different things. Thanos kind of comes across more as a villain, Whereas Darkseid to me isn't even really a villain. He's more so a universal function that's, as a result of his function, comes across as a dick. So that's more so the comparison on that note between who really is a god and one who seems to come across as a god, which, you know, in the MCU they played a lot upon in the dialogue exchange between Loki and Thanos in Infinity War. And I do think it kind of translates a little bit to comics and how Thanos functions in a majority of his stories. Next up, goals and ambitions simply fail to align, and Darkseid, as a result, comes across as the constant. Makes more sense to me for a Darkseid to be matched up with someone like a Galactus than it does for him to be matched up with Thanos. Again, like I said, Thanos is more the bandit slash pirate type. Like when he runs up on Galactus, he doesn't really, to me, in most stories, seem like an equal. He kind of seems like a guy who, because he's so clever and he can make so many power moves, he can eventually catch up to cosmic beings like Galactus. But he never really comes across as being on that level, whereas Darkseid always is, especially in his true form. So that's a big difference real quick, just in terms of like ambitions. One trying to go on personal gain to eventually gain some love, where the other is just, it's a business. That's all it is. Next up, the feeling of one being more of an end boss and one more being like trying to reach the end of a game. So Thanos is playing a game where he's trying to appease death, and Darkseid is trying to just be the end game dominating final boss. That's what he wants to be. And he already is a boss in his own right. So right there, that in itself is completely different. They carry themselves differently. One's a seeker, whereas one is an imposer. One completely dominates where one undermines. It's a kind of a different sense of positioning and mental. Like, it just, like, Darkseid comes across as more dominant and Thanos comes across as more mischievous. So the whole impression they leave, at least how they function in character most of the time, is completely different to me, and it doesn't line up in terms of matching up. Next up, roles in the cosmos are viewed completely different. One has a choice where one doesn't really have a choice. Darkseid's always going to be who he is, doesn't have a choice. He's going to carry on. That's how he functions in reality. That's how he was made to be as an archetypal function. On the other hand, Thanos is a schemer, and Thanos is a goon because that's what he wants to do. He wants to do hood rat stuff with his friend. So it's kind of an instant comparison between one guy who does what he does because he has to, and one who does it because he wants to. One has to be bad where one wants to be bad. Because of that, I think they're completely different in that aspect, and I don't think they line up like most people would like you to think. Finally, one is fundamental, where one is complex. Characters like Darkseid, I think, are defined perfectly, like when in Odyssey he was addressing heroes like Cyborg and he said, "I believe beings like you and people in your position call me something like villain?" And the way he said it, it was funny. Like, villain is such a silly word, and it is, because what Darkseid is so much further beyond human terms like villains. He's much more archetypal and primal in nature. So that word doesn't really encapsulate what he represents and what he seeks to do. It's just not a good descriptor for someone of his stature. On the other hand, Thanos is a villain. One of the best villains, yes. But unlike Darkseid, he's a villain, whereas Darkseid is a fundamental force. So there you have it. Those are most of my complaints in the matchup currently. Where I stand as a reader and someone that researches and scales, I just don't really like the matchup anymore. I don't think it's that great of a matchup. And I think other things like Darkseid and Galactus make more sense thematically. Let me know what you guys think. This is a bit of a different video, but I had a lot of fun making it. If you like videos like this where I address classic matchups, let me know. Anyways, it's been your boy, YFV, and I'll see y'all later. Peace.